Welcome to a special edition to the Drive at 5 on the IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station. We're breaking normal format this evening because of our special guest. He was the first Black Illinois State Comptroller, first Black Illinois Attorney General, first Black to win a statewide office in Illinois. Drive, sir.
Thank you, Roman. I appreciate it. Glad to be with you this afternoon.
Yeah, I had to hog tie you. Please give.
You got me. You got me.
Please give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station your background.
Well, Roman, I was born and raised in downstate Illinois. A young man grew up in a community of about 12,000 people. We went to segregated elementary schools, but we went to integrated high schools. Centralia was a town that was a little progressive. The only thing we couldn't do as Blacks in terms of race was to swim in the swimming pool that was in the park. As Blacks, we had to go swim out in the lakes of the brewers or the beaches. And it got to the point where the NAACP in my hometown decided that it was time for Blacks to swim in that pool. So 1951, they tried, it weren't successful. In 1952, they tried it. And in 53, the pastor was the AME pastor there. He was president of NAACP. My dad was vice president. And they said, okay, this year we're going to make it happen. So Memorial Day, 1953, there were my brother, who's 3 years older, he was at college. I was a sophomore in high school. And five of us young kids piled in the back of Reverend Stark's car, and we headed out to Fairview Park to swim in this pretty blue water. And so before 1953, they wouldn't even sell Blacks tickets to go in. So Reverend Starks approached the counter, and they sold him the 5 tickets. And then we looked around, and the pool was just lined with white people. They were just lined up to see whether or not these Black kids were going to be able to swim in this pool. And so we bought the tickets. We went out, all 5 of us. It was a cold Memorial Day. This is, May 1953. It was chilly. I was shaking. Didn't know if I was nervous or just cold. But Roman, I looked at that high diving board. I said, that looks interesting. I went up on that board, checked it out. Good spring. Took the most beautiful swan dive you ever want to see. Splash. Right into the pretty blue water. And we had integrated the swimming pool. By the way, I found out that the water wasn't blue. The bottom of the pool was painted blue. So that's that's what we had to deal with. But anyway, we swam. And people just looked at us and no incident. So we turned home and we were celebrating, all happy. And my father had left to come back. When he came back, he was very upset because he had hired a lawyer in case we got arrested. The lawyer that he hired didn't show up. He was from East St. Louis, Illinois. And so my father made this statement. I was 15 years old. If we as a race of people are going to get anywhere in this society, we have to have lawyers and elected officials who are responsible and responsive. That registered with me immediately. It really woke me up, 15 years old now. And I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a lawyer, and I'm going to be a statewide elected official of Illinois. Set my goals right there, then and there from my dad's statement. And from there on, when I went back to high school, my junior, because this was, school was out in June, we went back in my junior year at high school, put my got my brother's suit he had left home and my father's shirt and tie on, went back to school. The teachers didn't even know me because I'd made up my mind in high school that I was going to really get stuff together. And if I hadn't made a D in Latin and a D in geometry in my first 2 years, I would have graduated with high honors. I graduated with honors and got a scholarship to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, went there pre-law, studied Carbondale. Up on my junior year, you had been in liberal arts, you had to take a language. I took German, Come to find out, there was a program available for an exchange student program to the University of Hamburg. SIU would send 2 students to Germany, and 2 Germans would come to Southern Illinois. And so I competed in that whole system, and 2 of us were selected, 1 white kid and me. Out of some 200 applicants, I was selected to be the exchange student upon graduating with a bachelor's degree in political science from SIU to work on my master's degree at the University of Hamburg in Germany in the German language. And my study was international law. So I did a year on master's degree in international law at the University of Hamburg. I was going to come back to Southern and get my master's degree, but I got admitted to Howard Law School. Howard Law School, I was able to get a scholarship to Howard Law, and it's a whole interesting story there, but it's in my book too. But I was able then to matriculate to Howard Law, graduate from Howard Law, and come back to Chicago. First goal was accomplished, became a lawyer. What was my second goal, I told you? Statewide elected official.
Yes.
Now, how in the world are you going to do that, right? So I had to get a job. But my first job was a bank examiner for the Comptroller of the currency. I was the first Black in this nation to get credentials to examine a national bank. The Comptroller of the currency was created in 1863. I was first hired as a Black bank examiner in 1963. It took them 100 years to hire a Black person. So I did bank examining. I did that for a year because I was all over the Midwest. But we had a young family. My daughter had just been born in 64, and so my wife was kind of concerned about being home. So I had to get off the road. That's when I came into work for the biggest bank in the state, Continental Bank. I worked my way up the ranks, became a vice president, the first Black officer of the biggest bank in the state of Illinois at that time, Continental Illinois National Bank. And in the process of being in the bank, I was all active in the community. I was out, very active in politics, doing golfing for campaigns, helping candidates run, and finally I got to be a campaign manager. And then in 1968, I ran for state representative and lost, okay? But I was trying to get that second goal. I figured I was going to be a state representative, state senator, and then run statewide. Best thing ever happened is when I lost that state representative spot, because I learned later on, Roman, that if you get elected to an office, it is very difficult to move from that elected spot to another one. So I then pulled back and said, okay, I got to figure out how I can run statewide. 1976, by the way, I was selected then to be in Governor Dan Walker's cabinet as the director of general services. And now it's called Central Management Services. That's all the operations of government. I would report it directly to the governor. I was in charge of all the buildings, all the purchasing, the architecture.
Were you the first Black?
The first Black to do that. So then it came around, and this was 1973. So then we're going to come up in 74 years later, it'll be 77, 76, when Dan Walker was running for re-election. Well, that's when I jumped out and I'm going to run statewide. So I was on his ticket for state comptroller. I lost the Democratic primary. My first attempt statewide, 1976, I lost the primary election. But the state constitution allowed us to run again in 2 years rather than 4 years. I came back in 78, and that's a long story, but I try to cut it down somewhat. And I told my wife I was going to run again. She says, no, you ran as an independent. You didn't get elected. You lost that primary. The only way you can run, Roland, is you get the party's endorsement. Well, I'd fought the regular Democratic Party in Chicago for 12, 14 years. I was an independent Democrat. But I went and met a gentleman by the name of Eugene Sawyer, who was then alderman and committeeman of the 6th Ward. Met with Eugene and advised him what I wanted to do. He said, fine, let's do it. He brought me right into the organization. No questions, no conflict or anything. And they began to put together the apparatus for me to run again in 1978 with the office of state comptroller. I was able to go up against another white candidate because the white downstaters didn't think a Black could win statewide. And so the committeeman downstate then put up a white state senator that I had to beat in the primary. I won that primary. Then I had to go up against a rich white Republican in November who was in Jim Thompson's cabinet then. Now, and not only was he rich, but he flew his own twin engine Cessna. He owned a bank, and his father was 2 times Attorney General of the state of Illinois. I went up against him in 1978, and guess what? I won. I won by 153,000 votes, was elected as the first Black in the history of the state to the office of State Comptroller. That's the chief fiscal officer of our state.
What was your response when you found out you won and you were the first African American to win that position?
Well, the response was that thank God to the people of Illinois for recognizing my abilities and my skills to be a public servant, because I had set that goal. I didn't wake up one day and say, "Oh, I'm going to run statewide." I planned and volunteered, joined organizations, work with various community groups. I was a member of the Boy Scouts, member of the JCs, members of all the various organizations that would cause people to get a feel for Roland Burris and see how committed I was to public service and to helping people. And this is what a lot of young people don't do when they get involved in a organization. They don't give it their all with the idea of perhaps if I do right, I can advance. But you got to do right. You can't get in and get in. I want to advance. You got to establish yourself and make sure that people then begin to recognize what your commitment is. And when that takes place, then of course you have the opportunity to advance. But I just want to be known that I set those goals at the age of 15. And through the grace of the good Lord, I was able to achieve both of them. So that's kind of my background.
You set a lot of standards for Black politicians here in Illinois to become the first Black to win a statewide position. However, at the same time, looking back at things, it seems like you feel disrespected at the same time from the same politicians you paved the way for, and some you mentored. That's in your book. Tell us about that. You feel disrespected. Why you feel disrespected and you paved the way?
It's not that I feel disrespected. It's not so much the politicians, the community. The community does not recognize the barriers that I overcame and the trailblazing that I did for others to follow. You don't hear much about Roland Burris. You hear about you hear about a Harold Washington. I say if it wasn't for Roland Burris, there wouldn't be a Harold Washington. Okay. Even when Harold was getting ready to run for mayor, he was meeting with me, trying to get me to run 2 days before he announced for mayor. So that's kind of what I see happening, because see, I was in the process when I was state comptroller. I was making changes. I was doing the work of the comptroller. Stuff that I put into place 30 years ago is still now benefiting the people of the state of Illinois. And even when I was in the governor's cabinet, the things that I did as director of general services, for example, they have a thing now, they call it the Pony Express. You know what the Pony Express is? And the state of Illinois used to use a U.S. post office to mail across the street from the state office building in Springfield to the state capitol. Or they would mail that used the U.S. post office to mail in Springfield. Not to mention all the mail that was coming up to Chicago from Springfield, or vice versa. The mail coming from Springfield, coming from Chicago to go to Springfield. I set up a mail-in messenger system that the state is now taking advantage of. And in 1973 or 74, when that became operative, in those days, we saved the taxpayers of this state $1 million in postage. It's no big deal, but people don't know anything about that. That's not glamorous. That doesn't get any type of media exposure. So therefore, people don't know all the things that Roland Burris did to benefit them in this state.
Can you give us a brief synopsis of what Roland Burris have done?
Well, that's one of them. The other thing is, when I was a state comptroller, the state of Illinois, it didn't have what we call an accrual accounting system. That's a little confusing. The cash in, cash out. In accounting, you generally have a system where when the bills come in, you pay them. And if you haven't paid them, then they are not on the books. Well, the state was at this time was the fifth largest state in the nation. We had 13 million people in the state at the time. And Illinois became a state in 1818. They had never set up an accounting system that would allow an accrual basis, which means that obligations are made, and once there's obligations made, then it's booked, and therefore you know what your condition is. You know how much you owe. You know how much is coming at you in terms of what your obligations are. The state of Illinois was a cash in, cash out basis, and so being active in the whole financial system of the country, with all other state comptrollers, state auditors, state treasurers, then we were able, through an organization that deals with finance officers called the GFOA, Government Finance Officers of the United States and Canada. And we were able to set up an accrual accounting system. My office and the Auditor General's office produced a financial statement in 1984 in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The governor didn't want that because it would show that the state of Illinois was running a deficit. So, because we owed more money, we had more bills than we had money to pay.
Since you was in office, according to your book, you saved the state and the city a lot of money. Don't get credit for that.
No, because that is not sexy. That doesn't sell on on LaSalle Street in Chicago.
But you also help Black-owned and operated businesses.
That was when I was in the banking business. But when I was state comptroller, by the way, we changed the whole accounting system. In order to do that, we had to hire consultants. I did something that never been done before. You have to hire the big accounting firms, the Pete Marwicks, the Arthur Andersons, those big companies. But I said, okay, if we're going to change this accounting system, then I'm going to have a minority contract to work right along with a majority contractor. And we had about 5 or 6 Black businesses that were able to, for the first time, get work with the state government. Okay, when I was a lawyer, I had put out businesses to Black law firms, and I was Attorney General of the state. For the first time, Black lawyers were able to get legal business from the state of Illinois. When I was the Director of General Services under Dan Walker, Governor Ogilvie was in office, and I handled all the purchasing for the state. All we could find was one contract that Governor Ogilvie had left to a Black company in 1969. We came in 73. In 1 year, I increased that with Black companies. $400,000 of business was done with Black companies in the state of Illinois my first year. My second year, it went up to $1 million. My third year as a cabinet officer, it went up to $2 million. The fourth year, Roman, it was $4 million a year that we were doing with Black companies. For example, the Black movers that moved for public aid workers, that the state would pay public aid recipients if they were being moved, the state would pay their moving. Black movers wouldn't have those contracts. But under Roland Burris' administration and Dan Walker's administration, they got contracts. Let me give you another one. Cleaning downtown buildings. Black janitors couldn't work in buildings because there was a contract, a union contract, that if you were not cleaning a building downtown, you couldn't clean a building. You couldn't even bid on it. I had all that declared illegal. Those are illegal contracts. And when Black businesses were able to bid on janitorial work for downtown office buildings. So that's the kind of breaking barriers that Burris did in his tenure.
You talk in your book, the public and media never got a chance to hear your side of the story about former Governor Blagojevich. appointed you in a former President Barack Obama's Senate seat. Later to find out that you had a conversation with Governor Blagojevich's brother. What is your side of the story regarding the appointment? It's in your memoir, but
Well,
a lot of, I mean, Chicago media, you said, kind of buried the truth here.
no, they didn't bury you. They tried to bury me. The media attacked me because I had the audacity to accept the appointment that was legal and proper by the governor. And I had not tried to buy the seat. I had not tried to, make any kind of deals to get the seat. When he appointed me, I accepted it. And the media came down on me and tried to do everything they could to find out whether or not I had done something that was illegal or immoral. As a matter of fact, I testified at the House of Representatives Impeachment Committee of the governor. And that testimony, I was asked all these questions that had anything to do with my being appointed by the governor. But they were seeking to try to, I guess, entrap me. But then when it came down, I testified and it all came out. And then they turned around and said, well, Burris committed perjury. His testimony.
But that was revealed by a reporter from the Chicago Sun-Times.
No. The perjury, no. What the accusation was from the House, the Republicans' House of Representatives members. The Sun-Times, we'll deal with them in a minute. But on that side, the report was made by the Republicans that Burris had lied in his testimony. So therefore, saying about the appointment, that how I got the appointment, they said I lied to the impeachment committee and therefore I committed perjury in my testimony. And Mike Madigan, who was then Speaker of the House, sent my testimony to the prosecutor in Sangamon County, who was a Republican, to prosecute me for perjury. Come to find out after a long story and investigation that as the prosecutor who was a Republican, sent a letter back to Mike Madigan, which is in my book, that said that Roland Burris in no way, form, or shape committed any perjury. As a matter of fact, what he did was correct. The questions that were asked, he answered them. The other questionnaires didn't follow up. The questioners didn't follow up with asking me further questions. And so therefore, the questions that were asked, I answered them. The other situation was that there was another point there in terms of what the questions were, and in terms
and
of
how it was phrased.
And how it was phrased. And then so the prosecutor said that I did the right thing. See, what happened, Roman, was I submitted an affidavit to complete some of the questions that they had not answered properly. Where my lawyer at the end of the testimony said, look, if we're going to read over the transcripts and we see something that's incomplete of my testimony, then we'll respond to it in writing, and got the chairman of the committee's okay to be able to do that. Well, when they got the transcripts and my lawyer looked over the transcripts, they said, well, this Republican House member asked about this person and that person and that person, and Roland, you only answered one person about the governor's brother. You didn't answer about all these other employees that they'd asked you about. So we submitted an affidavit with what I had talked to them about. And so that was our completion of our testimony. The prosecutor said that was the proper thing to do, and therefore there was no way I committed perjury. As a matter of fact, the case was still open, and the fact that I submitted an affidavit was still in the process, and that was fitting and proper. So there's no way did I commit perjury. But then what the Sun-Times did, when that came out, because this was in February of 2009, the state's attorney, the prosecutor, state's attorney from Sangamon County issued this report in April of 2009 saying no perjury. Well, the Sun-Times then turn around and say, well, no perjury, but the Senate Ethics Committee is still investigating Burris, as if something was there. I was being investigated by the Senate Ethics Committee. And come to find out, they finally issued the Senate Ethics Committee report in November of '09. It came out and said, well, Burris had, was issued a qualified admonishment because he had used statements that were unbecoming of a senator. What they were talking about, when I had a conversation on the telephone with the governor's brother, I wasn't even a United States senator. That just shows you how bogus all this was. So the press would not print any of that. They tried to say that Burris, had lied, and Burris had, sought to buy the seat, and I mean,
even to the extent that they said that you were willing to fundraise in order to get the seat.
No, see, look, I was Governor Blagojevich beat me for governor in '02. We were candidates for governor. I had worked with him during his administration. I had helped him get elected. When I lost the primary to Governor Blagojevich, I helped him get elected in the general election to beat Jim Ryan. Because I beat Jim Ryan for Attorney General when I was elected Attorney General. So I was able to help Blagojevich get elected governor, and therefore I was working with his staff, his administration, because I had all this knowledge of Illinois government. So I was working very closely with his people. So, there was no problem with me in terms of, working with the governor. And so I didn't, do anything that was illegal or immoral. My thing was showing him where we could cut out waste in government. Because if you get to be governor, then you're in charge. As Attorney General or as a Comptroller, you're not really the chief executive.
But people are wondering why you took the seat. According to your book, you discussed the situation with U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, and he said you knew the consequences regarding taking the seat, and it was, quote, tainted, and wanted you to resign. Why you took the seat knowing that it was tainted?
I wasn't tainted. The governor had to take it. I haven't done anything wrong. I run for the United States Senate in 1984. Paul Simon beat me in the primary for the United States Senate. And so therefore, I sought the appointment. I was trying to get appointed to the Senate. My people were calling the governor's office. My friends were contacting the governor and said, if you really want to fill the Obama seat, you should put another African American in that seat. And the first qualified person is Roland Burris. As a matter of fact, when I was talking to someone, I had a friend from New Jersey, a letter into the governor's office saying that the best person that you could appoint to fill this seat, I've been elected statewide 4 times. The knowledge of Illinois government. That's what the Senate would be. But see, Durbin and some of the other Democrats, they had other agendas. They wanted some other person to be appointed to that seat. They didn't want, number one, they didn't want a black appointed. That's number one. But that seat was also Carol Moseley Braun's seat. It was also Barack Obama's seat. And so, that's what they were trying to evidently keep the Senate without having any black, because those 2 years I was there, I was the only black in the Senate. So you end up with this, various pressures and opposition that was coming from Durbin, but guess where the support was coming from? The leader of the United States Senate, a gentleman by the name of Harry Reid. And by the way, you'll see in this book where Harry Reid wrote a piece in the foreword of my book in terms of how of a good senator I was during those 2 years that I was there. And so, it was just a matter of politics, and they tried to catch me up in the politics when all my life I had been as clean and as non-controversial as you could be, and no hint of a scandal. I mean, I'd been elected to Comptroller 3 times, elected Attorney General, and run for governor 3 times of this state without a hint of a scandal. But then the press didn't even look at that and say, well, this person is clean.
Did you ever had a conversation with former President Barack Obama regarding the seat?
No, I did not. No, I did not.
Did you have any conversations like with with the president?
No, I had conversations with the president about when I was a senator.
Yeah,
We had to meet on the health care bill, Obamacare.
but not regarding the
We had
seat.
nothing to say about the appointment, and I think, and let me just say it over the air right now, I think that what happened to Governor Blagojevich was just totally unfair.
Well,
Yeah,
that
it's
was going
totally
to
unfair.
be my next question here. Have
Mm.
you ever talked to former Blagojevich regarding your situation with the that you can share with us what that they
I've never
think?
talked. I never talked with him, but just recently, I did get a call from his wife Patty, and because I was explaining to Patty what I'd been doing behind the scenes. For example, being a former attorney general, there was a case out of Virginia where the governor of Virginia was being prosecuted. It went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said there was no quid pro quo, and therefore the governor who had taken things was actually case was reversed. So I was trying to get in touch with Blagojevich's lawyer and let him know that to make sure he tried to use that as a reason to get Blagojevich's case at least heard again, because there was nothing changed hands. There was nothing that went from here to there in terms of Blagojevich trying to sell the seat. What he was doing is just run his mouth too much and was talking, and all he done was talk. There was nothing changed hands nowhere. So, but he got convicted of these things, and it's okay. Got convicted, but 14 years for that, I said that's totally unfair. And he's been.
Do you think the sentence were
The
too harsh?
sentence was outrageous. And I know Judge Zagel. I know him very well. I think it was just out of line. Because the man has served 7 years already for nothing actually being transpired. Nothing changed hands. He talked about what he wanted to do. He's getting convicted for running his mouth.
Former President Barack Obama's Attorney General Eric Holder mentioned to media outlets that the former Governor Blagojevich sentence was too harsh and should be granted a clemency or pardon from the former president. Do you think he should have been granted clemency or pardon by President Obama? And they totally overlooked it was right on his desk.
Well, no, I think that would have been too harsh for President Obama to do that.
Why?
Because he was right in the middle of that, and it was his Senate seat, and it would have been a negative thing on him if he turned around and pardon Blagojevich, because then they would say, "Oh, that was all a part of the scheme." They're like, Trump has done it already. The Trump pardoned these criminals. He pardoned the sheriff out in Arizona.
But in all fairness, Donald Trump is doing the same thing, putting it out there that he's going to grant a clemency for Blagojevich.
He hadn't done it yet.
Yeah,
he hadn't done it yet. And that clemency or pardon. And clemency means you admitted that there was a crime and you are convicted for the time served. Pardon means that your record will be made clean. And that's why we really want either one. As speaking with the governor's wife, she will take a clemency or a pardon, but really prefer a pardon, because a pardon will then will wipe his record clean. And this, of course, if he gets.
But what are your thoughts about the Attorney General saying the same thing that you are saying?
Well, it's true. I mean, the sentence for what Blagojevich did is just totally too harsh.
But why nobody didn't challenge the judge?
You can't challenge the judge. That's his ruling. They appealed it to the court. The appellate court upheld what the judge did. The Supreme Court wouldn't even hear his case. So that's final. What Judge Zagel did, 14 years, was final. The only hope that Blagojevich has is to get a clemency, a petition from the president, or a pardon from the president. Otherwise, he got to serve in another 6 or 7 years.
A lot of people call for your resignation, from the House Speaker Michael Madigan to Illinois U.S. Senator candidate Alexis Giannoulias,
which he lost. He lost the election because he did that. Go ahead.
Who really pushed for your resignation during his run. What is surprising? You endorsed him. However, you didn't like what he did or said about you. Why you decided to endorse Alexis Giannoulias?
Because I want that seat to stay in the Democratic hands. That's bigger than what he was saying about me. And Giannoulias did call for me to resign. and so did Pat Quinn, who was running for governor. But Quinn has subsequently apologized to me.
But is that on the record that Quinn apologized to you?
I don't know whether or not it is. I stated it, certainly after the press never did print it. But there were some of the candidates that were calling for my resignation. I said, look, I've done absolutely nothing wrong. You can forget that. I'm not going anywhere. If I resigned, that would mean I was guilty of something. So I didn't do anything wrong, but I took the appointment, and I was clean as you ever want to be. Let me tell you something. Word came through that he was arrested. I created a group called Coalition of African American Leaders. And what happened that night was that after the meeting, the guy we got to talk about Blagojevich being arrested, and the colleagues looked at me and said, "Roland, you're the best guy to take that Senate seat." I said, "Well, look, you all got to do something about that. I can't do something about that." So they got together and said, "Okay, we're going to do something about it." They then, I told them I'll get back to them the next day, but I said, if y'all want me to put something together, I will. So we got a press person. We met with them, and they then that was a Tuesday. On that Saturday, Roman, they called a press conference, and I was sitting in the back of the room. And what they're saying that if the governor is going to appoint anybody to that seat, they should appoint Roland Burris. Now, these were some pretty high-powered black folks in the city of Chicago that were supporting. Even the lady who ran with me for lieutenant governor was there. And another deceased friend of mine, Judge Bill Cousins, appellate court justice Cousins, was there. They were all saying that Burris should be the one that the governor appoint to the seat. The governor's lawyer saw that press conference and heard that press conference. That's how the governor ended up appointing me. His lawyer went to him eventually and said, look, if you're going to appoint anybody to that seat, Governor, it should be Roland Burris. And that's what the governor's lawyer came to me, met with me, and told me that.
Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Tribune said, according to your memoir, untruth, lies, and slanderous accusations about your appointment that prompted you to write an editorial to them, which was heavily edited by the editor. Why you didn't sue both papers for mischaracterizing?
Couldn't find a lawyer who would take the case. The Tribune in its editorial, made a statement.
But why you didn't? You're a lawyer. Why you didn't take it?
No, I'm not a trial lawyer. Okay. And to prove something of that magnitude, it's very expensive. I already had $800,000 of legal bills. I had 9 different legal cases around my appointment. The law firm had forgiven a substantial amount of that, but I had to pay out of my pocket in legal bills over $300,000 in legal bills fighting all these different issues. And so based on that, to then try to go after the Sun-Times, there's an old saying, Roman, that you don't pick a fight with an organization that buy ink by the barrel.
You have spent close to $1 million in legal fees to clear your name. According to your book, you thought it was $100,000 and you were surprised it was actually $800,000. After you examined everything, do you think it was worth it to keep the Senate seat?
I mean, the appointment, it was worth it, because if I had resigned from the seat, it's still going to have to deal with all those issues that were coming out. So the resigning was not going to eliminate the
situation.
Situation, because somebody sued saying that should have been a special election, rather than the governor appointed me and me standing there for 2 years. That it should have been a special election. And so the federal district court judge, since I was in the seat, joined me in that litigation. My lawyers then had to defend me, and I didn't want to go in that litigation, but the court said you'll defend that. And so I had to hire a lawyer to defend me in the fact that they were trying to say that it should have been an election, rather than, another thing is, the Secretary of State wouldn't sign the governor's appointment. And so we had to sue.
But at one point in time, you and Jesse White was real good friends.
We were good friends, but Jesse, we talked that day before. He congratulated me when I told him I was going to take the appointment. He called me back 4 or 5 hours later and said, "Well, Roland, I can't sign the papers." I said, "What are you talking about, Jesse? The government's going to appoint me. Well, I'm not going to sign it. I promised people I wasn't going to sign it." So then we had to get a writ of mandamus in the Supreme Court. That cost me $150,000 in legal bills to try to get the Secretary of State to do what he was supposed to do under law. The Supreme Court ordered him to issue a certified copy of the appointment because the Secretary of State cannot veto actions of the governor. And it would cost $10. We had offered him $10 for him to do that before, but Jesse wouldn't accept that. It cost me $150,000 to get the Secretary of State to sign the document. And then what he did, he certified it on a separate sheet of paper. It was not on the same piece of paper where the governor's signature was. The question was, when that document got to the Senate, whether or not it was going to meet Rule 2 of the Senate to allow me to be seated. And then they were going to try to send me to Rules Committee of the Senate because they were not sure that the document was going to be accepted. But when it came down, the lawyers and the parliamentarian of the Senate and all of them began to check it out and said, okay, they would accept it. And that's when they decided that they would seat me. And I was seated on January 15th rather than January 6th of 2009.
When State Comptroller Judy Bartopinka passed away, you were livid at some of the media outlets that left you out of the past State Comptroller. And they said it was an oversight. You said, no way.
I
it was
don't even remember that. What was it about?
Judy Bartopinka,
yeah, I know when she died, yes.
Passed away.
Yeah.
They paid tribute to other state controllers. Didn't mention your name. You was livid about that.
When was this?
This is in your memoir.
No.
It's basically on page, I think, 382.
No.
But you were kind of upset about they didn't mention you as state controller in a passing.
Well, I don't recall that part, but if you say anything about state controllers, because I was the third comptroller in the history of the state. The office was created in 27. We had the first one elected in 72, and then a Democrat beat Mike McCallum beat George Lindbergh and became a comptroller in 76. And then he turns around and runs for governor in 78. That's when I ran again for comptroller in 78. But I certainly had established the office because George Lindbergh came in to set up the office. He lost. But Callis came in for 2 years. He managed the office and nothing was done. I came in 78. I had to reestablish an office, okay, and establish the comptroller's office and set all these things in the motion that would process checks and keep up with the system of the state of Illinois. And I don't recall myself being personally upset because of it, because the press didn't mention me about anything unless it was bad. One person of the Chicago Tribune made this statement when we were talking about some other issue with reference to Carol Moseley Braun, that she had done something with her mother, and I was Attorney General, and they wanted me to prosecute Carol Moseley Braun. And they said the reason why I didn't prosecute Carol Moseley Braun is because she was black. And I didn't prosecute, and they said, well, no, that's not the case. And of course, it came out then. The Tribune, one of its deputy editors, made this statement that we're not going to do anything to advance Roland Burris's political career.
The term quid pro quo and pay to play became known in Illinois first regarding former Governor Blagojevich's scandal. Now, years later, you have Donald Trump doing the same thing because it was politics, not actions, as you say. The shoe is on the other foot regarding what the Illinois and other national Republicans were calling the former Governor Blagojevich impeachment. Now they are saying something different, totally opposite. There are similarities between Donald Trump's impeachment and the former governor Blagojevich
I beg to
impeached.
differ with you. There is
What?
Blagojevich's action does not come close to what Trump has done in this nation. I mean, Trump has lied 15,400 and some times. So you cannot compare anything that Blagojevich did to Donald Trump, because all Blagojevich did was to run his mouth. He was talking. You can't show whether there's any money changed hands. And Trump, he won't even turn over his tax returns. This man is an embarrassment to the nation and to the world. And he's getting away with it too. And so therefore, Trump and Blagojevich that's just two different situations.
A lot of African American politicians are in key positions. For example, Illinois State Attorney General Kwame Raoul, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx. The first time in Illinois history we have two African Americans serving in these positions at the same time. However, people are not seeing the changes that these politicians have promised. What is your advice to give to Kim Foxx or Kwame Raoul regarding handling crimes in Illinois that involves the African American community?
Well, by the way, let me point out something to you too.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, before Kim Foxx was state's attorney, we also had a black state's attorney, Cecil Partee. He ran for re-election and lost. And I was not attorney general at that time, but I became attorney general of the state. But now what we do have now is something that no other state in the nation has. And that's 3 black constitutional officers out of 6. We have a lieutenant governor, we have an attorney general, and we have a secretary of state. That's 2, 3, and 4 officers that hold office. But in terms of Kim Foxx and Kwame Raoul, what Kim Foxx has done has been tremendous. That office was a office that was really designed to carry out the actions that would keep black folks in its place, keep black folks under the gun. Kim Foxx has changed a great deal of that. In terms of the Attorney General's office, see, the major prosecutor in this state are the 102 state's attorneys. The Attorney General has prosecutorial authority, but 90% of his work is civil. He backs up the state's attorney, but the Attorney General is not involved in much of that crime prosecution as the U.S. attorney for federal crimes and the state's attorney for state crimes. The Attorney General can also prosecute you if the state's attorney does not. But generally, just by practice, most of that authority has been yielded from the Attorney General's office for the people of the state to the 102 prosecutors across the state.
Reading your book, despite everything that was said about you, you hung in there in the Democratic Party. You could have switched parties because of treatment you have endured that prompted this question to me. Do you describe yourself as a loyalist or loyal to the values that represents the Democratic Party? Do you describe yourself as a Democratic?
By the way, I used to be a Republican. When I was in college, I was a member of the Young Republicans because all my family were Republicans downstate. But coming to see what the Republican Party was doing for the advancement of my people, there's no way I could be a Republican. But I had problems with the Democrats because they were doing stuff too. That's when I was an independent Democrat. I fought Richard A. Daley, the old man, Richard J. Daley. I fought him for 12 years before I got into politics, and I finally joined the regular Democratic Party. But my whole philosophy would lean toward a fairness to people, and I think that the Democratic Party is more fair. Take one quick example: voter suppression. The Republican Party is trying to do everything they can, Roman, to stop people from voting, primarily black people, because they know that they can't hold the power if we go to the polls and vote, and black people are not going to the polls and vote. I would be governor of this state today if the black people had come to the polls and voted.
When people mention former Senator Roland Burris in the history books, what will you hope people remember you about your legacy in politics by, instead of that's the guy who took Obama's seat?
That Roland Burris was a trailblazer. That Roland Burris set his sights on knocking down barriers and establishing the opportunity for other blacks to come behind him. That's what I want all the young kids to read my book, because in that book it sets out how I set my goals, how I planned my future, and that I did it on behalf and on for the benefit of my people.
Well, to be continued. Don't be a stranger to the Drive at 5.
To Drive at 5. What is it? iHeart,
Radio.
Impact Radio, Drive at 5.
Where they can get your book?
Oh, well, you have to call me. The book can be bought from me because it's no longer on Amazon, but it's still in print. I still have a few copies. They can call my home, 773-873-3371, and order the book. The book will cost $30. I need $5 for shipping and handling, and so that'll be $35. They send a check and they'll get an autographed copy of the book. But no books will go out until the check's clear.
Come back on the show anytime, my man.
My pleasure, Robin. Appreciate it. You did your homework. You studied hard.
Yeah, I'm tired for it too. That's going to do it for the Drive at 5. Thanks to Earl Winfrey, our executive producer, Wanda, who's behind the scenes. You guys have a great week. Happy New Year.